Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining this special broadcast tonight with Guy Mclendon. My name is Jess Mears, and I am a libertarian activist. And tonight we are taking a little bit of a history trip to the 90s and the 2000s and 2012 to uncover the story of how Gary Johnson went from being a Republican to a libertarian. And this is a really interesting topic in 2020 as a lot of individuals had people that were elected to public office that they wanted to switch over to the Libertarian Party to run for office. And I think what really we needed to do is take a deep dive from the people that were involved in getting Gary Johnson recruited to the Libertarian Party. So a few months ago, I spoke to Mark Rutherford, and he told me that the person I need to talk to is Guy Mclendon. So I have Guy Mclendon with me tonight so he can teach us how did a group of libertarians recruit Gary Johnson to run for president in 2012. Guy, thank you for joining everyone on the internet tonight. Could you please do an introduction of your history with the Libertarian Party?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Jess, for this opportunity. I first joined the Libertarian Party as an activist in Mississippi in 1980, first working on the Ed Clark campaign. I also worked on the Berglund campaign some, met Ron Paul in 1988, a great man. That's how my introduction to him started. Kind of went on a hiatus, somewhat inactive until the year 2001, when I saw the World Trade Center fall, liberties were under attack. So I felt duty obligated to jump in and begin trying to restore freedom again in this country. So my history since 2001 is lengthy and complicated, but I served in the Houston area as the chairman of Harris County for 3 terms. I was on the Texas State Executive Committee for several terms, one serving under Pat Dixon as his vice chair for 1 term. Texas graciously sent me to the National Platform Committee for 3 terms. So I was educated there by people much smarter than I am.
Wow.
And call out to Brian Holtz and Alicia Matheson. They were really good mentors in that effort. And LNC sent me as a platform committee member 1 time. So I was a member of the LNC when I first started trying to recruit Gary.
So you shared with me a timeline, which I'm going to, not that one. I'm going to pull it up on the screen so that everyone can see the materials that we're going to be referencing this evening. And we have a number of documents that we'll be going through. And so bear with us tonight as we go back in history and Guy unravels this whole effort to recruit, as today, the most successful presidential candidate that the Libertarian Party has ever had. So Guy, here's the timeline that you've put together. We have it displayed on screen. Would you like to go over some of this information?
Certainly. Thank you again for the chance. Well, as y'all know, Gary was running for president on the GOP ticket. He was in the first debate. And then when they cut him out of the next debate, I was calling his office. The first person I spoke with was Grant Huey. I introduced myself, member of the National Committee. I would like Gary to consider switching over to the Libertarian Party. He took a message, and I didn't really expect a whole lot out of it. So Gary was in the next debate. The second time they cut him out of a debate, I'll call it again. And the next time I spoke with Grant again, he put me in contact with Ron Nilsen. And so after playing phone tag, Ron Nilsen and I spoke. And after explaining the opportunity and so forth, he gave me a sentence that I could quote, that a senior staff member of the Johnson campaign would like to know what kind of support there would be for a Libertarian Party campaign. And Ron indicated that they would pretty much need to see a groundswell of support in order to, take action and move over. So I can quote you in public. Yes. Okay. I got marching orders. at that point, the first thing I did, I started a Facebook group, and there was a fellow in Mississippi named Jack Gannon, who him and I I posted invitations from my Facebook friends list. He did the same, and those two friends lists basically became the core of that first Facebook group. And so, thanks again to Jack Gannon. And we get started, and do you want to jump in here, or do you want to just keep going?
Well, I would like to know, what was it that initially interested you about Gary when he was in the debates?
Of course, his famous line about his neighbor's dog got more shovel-ready jobs was interesting. That was cute. It got a lot of popular attention. What really struck me as noteworthy, though, is that there were two libertarians on stage during those GOP debates, Ron Paul and Governor Johnson. Both are wonderful people. I just love them both to death. Gary in particular is extremely humble as you get to know him. He's very competitive. He likes to win. If he does something, he wants to win. But at the same time, he's a very humble person, very capable. I just think the world of him. But what really got me interested in calling his office was the fact that when you had two libertarians on stage, they would agree with each other, even though they were each getting a fraction of the time of the other candidates. They were sitting there synergizing. Mm-hmm. So it's my personal speculation that the establishment did not want two libertarians on stage at the same time, because it's hard to mock and ridicule two outstanding people when they're sitting there agreeing with each other. And so is what struck me as being a great opportunity, right. And that's why I was really calling him. So
the next item in the timeline, you have the letter from Hardy, which we have on screen for anybody to read whenever they'd like to.
Yes. So as I kind of got my marching orders, I started calling out to my friends list, and I knew Hardy from having been on the National Platform Committee. Him and I established a strong rapport. Another wonderful person, Hardy was. And so he was active up in the, I think, New Hampshire, Northeast United States area with Gary, active in the Republican campaign. And so he and I started talking, and, again, I was putting the broadcast out at this point in time. I was just trying to figure out how are we going to do this to demonstrate a groundswell. I didn't know if a groundswell of support was in context of the LP membership or nationwide, but whatever it was, I had to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I got from the National Committee the names of delegates from the last two national conventions. And so between Hardy and I, we decided, okay, well, we definitely need to mail a letter to the delegates most likely to attend the national convention. Hardy and I agreed that he would draft the letter. He mailed it to my home. You notice the zip code there is Houston, Texas.
Yeah,
that's my old residence in Houston. So you can see Hardy marked himself living at my house in Houston, so to speak. And so he printed off the letters. He mailed them to my house together. And he and I, I'm sure there was probably a lot of input on those poll questions. I forget exactly who helped on developing the poll. But if you could flip to the top of the poll.
Sure thing. I'll grab that one.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of documents we're reviewing this evening. All right. This is the poll?
Yes. And if you look at the top part of that poll, that's the exact design of the ad that was placed in the LP News. It said paid for as an independent expenditure by Guy Mclendon. But that's pretty much the ad that was placed, as memory serves. And it has the link, like click here, that libertycoalition.us was hosted on my web server at the time. And we got all the results from those poll questions that you can see there. And you may want to flash to the poll analysis.
Okay. All right. So if anybody wants to take a look at this poll, they can take a screenshot of the video. The video is also going to be available in the future as well for anyone to reference back to. And here is the results of the poll.
Yeah, so hard copies mailed. So when you look at that stack of envelopes on the table, there were 756. You see the numbers there. So there was some support there. In fact, predominantly supportive. The poll
let's go ahead and pull open the, I'll get the photo of the letters that you sent out.
Yeah.
Here are the letters. So these are the over 700 letters that went to delegates of the prior two conventions.
That's correct. And
All right.
the names of the volunteers who helped stuff those envelopes was Natalie Hosanna, Greg Stoessel, Gloria McLendon, Georgia McLendon, and Darcy Cobbs. So that was the little team that helped stuff those envelopes.
I'm going to pull back open the timeline document, and so everyone can refresh their memory on this timeline that you've put together. So the individuals that helped with the stuffing the envelopes, their names are right there on September 5th. So then Gary was in another debate after the letters went out.
Yes, and I know that he was disappointed about not being in debates twice, so it must have been the second through fifth debates. Two of those is probably when I called asking to speak with him. And as you can see there, I've got some basis for I had to dig through records to find the dates, but the news ad, LP News, about October. And then I gave them the poll results December 20th, and then he announced his candidacy on December 28th.
Wow. So it took only a few days between getting these poll results back and then Gary Johnson deciding to make a firm commitment to run for president as a Libertarian.
Yeah, I would like to, say that there was probably a lot of things happening outside my personal vision. I certainly don't want to take credit for anything that happened that, wasn't directly, myself or anything. There was a lot of people probably talking to Gary, pleading with him to consider it. These poll results, I think, was critical information that went to Ron Nielsen and their team.
And I'm looking at the names of the individuals that contributed to the LP News ad. John Shuey, Chuck Moulton, Lynn House, Ron Rollins. These are people that I personally know, and I know they have been longtime, very loyal activists within the Libertarian Party, donating their time and money to our efforts. So I'm sure this has been a really interesting process, seeing the effort to draft Gary Johnson and then getting him to be a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. It must have been very rewarding.
It truly was. And as things got going further and further, it got just more and more exciting, getting to meet Gary in person. First time I met him, I was one of the two Texas co-chairs of his campaign. And he came to the Texas State Convention. He had a radio interview in a room. And there was nobody in the room but me and him. And I was taking like posters off the wall. When he finished his interview, he started assisting me to take posters off the wall, which if, a former governor helping an activist do, modest work, that's just one small instance of his humility that really struck me as making him a wonderful person.
I was on the campaign trail with him in 2016 as his advance person for part of the election, and hearing the way that his daughter spoke about him said so much to me about his character. She had the most beautiful, wonderful things to say about her dad, and he seems like, just the little I know him of working with him, he's a person of so much character and so gracious and kind. And so this is really interesting to see how this timeline went from you reaching out to Ron Nielsen to Gary Johnson becoming our presidential nominee. Have you thought about what would have happened if you would have never made that call?
It's hard to know. It's a fork in the road, and as I think Yogi Berra said, when you reach a fork in the road, take it. I think Wayne Allen Root even made a joke of that at a convention, but it's hard to know.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to have had a role to play.
I'm so thankful that you did, because Gary Johnson shaped so much of my career and my life. And I hear all the time stories of people who say that Gary Johnson was their first introduction to the libertarianism ideology, and they would have never found it if it wasn't for Gary Johnson and catching on to his campaign. So he's inspired so many people.
He's truly a great person. Also, I might mention that our all-time high election results at that point was, I think, the Ed Clark campaign, who got 921,000 votes and 1.06% of the vote at the time. When Gary ran in 2012, he got like 1.2 or 3 million votes, not quite the percentage because the nation had grown. But when he ran in 2016, he more than tripled the previous all-time high of the Ed Clark campaign percentage-wise. 3.3% or 3.29% of the vote is a significant milestone for our party, and I pray that we will build upon that success.
Most definitely. I have the election results pulled up right here, and I think it's so tremendous to see the difference in our election results from prior to 2016. Gary got over 1 million votes, and in 2016, the ticket of Johnson Weld, and we received over 4 million votes. 4 million people decided to vote for the Libertarian on the ballot. And it's so exciting to have built on top of that effort. From 2016, we've had a lot of successes. We have Jeff Hewitt. We had Laura Ebke join the Libertarian Party. So we've continued in building momentum. And we're right now in 2020, in the middle of it, a week before our national convention. And we're going to have, in a week, a nominee and a vice president for our ticket. But I wanted to dig into this history because there are people that are libertarian-leaning legislators currently in office, and I don't often hear efforts on how can we draft individuals. And so thank you so much for taking the time to outline how you did it. You really went through from beginning to end on how that all worked. And how 1 to 10, how much work do you think that really was?
It was a considerable effort, and we spread it out amongst quite a few people. There were probably people not actively involved in my timeline that were out there working as well. Hard to know. I mean, I spent, some money and time. It's been a while. I hesitate to say exactly how much money and how much time, but it wasn't a small task.
Sure. Certainly, getting letters out to 700 people is a lot of work. I've never done that before.
Designing the poll, just talk on the phone, begging people to consider it, talking through a lot of naysayers that just didn't want to hear it, like you're drinking Drano and it's a fantasy, ain't going to happen. Yeah, it will.
And I remember in 2011 that Facebook wasn't really all that prominently utilized by the way it is today. Everyone's on Facebook, but back then it was not everybody had a Facebook account at that time.
That's true. 2011, it was getting some traction. There was a lot of people on it. I think we had over 400 people join that Facebook group that me and Jack helped put together. Yeah.
So it really went from you reaching out to Gary Johnson's campaign and then starting the groundswell, showing how there was support and that people wanted Gary Johnson in the Libertarian Party, and you made it happen.
Apparently, Ron Nilsen looked at the poll results and looked at the overall environment, at our stuff and everything else. I'm sure he looked at a lot of information, and yay, they made the decision, and I'm glad for it.
I am as well, and I think a lot of people are. And I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to collect the information, outline it in a timeline, and share it, because this is information that we need to preserve and we need to replicate. As you know, there's libertarian legislators out there today. There will be more in the future, and I want them on the Libertarian Party's ticket and with us to defeat the duopoly. So I'm grateful you took the time to share this information, because it's recorded and it'll be online. And is there more information that you would like to make sure to convey?
Well, there's one last little point I'd like to make. I appreciate Justin Amash's consideration in joining us.
Mhm.
He is still a capital L Libertarian congressman. And if you can imagine the influence the Libertarian Party could have if we could get enough congressmen to switch, or congresspeople to switch parties to the point that we had a third-party voting bloc that was big enough so that there was not a majority with either D or R, and they had to have us to be the swing vote to pass any legislation. We could truly whiplash the establishment back and forth if we had
It would
enough.
be very
good congressmen.
interesting.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
it would be a tremendous leverage if we had enough congressmen coming over to us. Like Justin Amash, he's one, but imagine the difference between the D's and R's was like 10, and we had 15 congressmen. Oh, they would have to have our vote in order to get a majority. Oh,
Yeah. Larry always talks about the 80-20 rule. And I have never met an individual that came to the party and didn't leave it without becoming more libertarian. You get involved and you learn more about the ideology and the ideas, the solutions, and all the topics. And so every individual that I've ever met that's came into this movement has either stayed or left, but become more libertarian in the process. And I think that in the event that we could recruit more legislators, they would only become more libertarian with time. And so they're out there, and we can recruit them and help them learn more about us as they're new to us and part of a new libertarian voting bloc in our federal legislature.
indeed. I think that's an important goal to seek.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Guy, for taking this time. Last words before we wrap up the broadcast for tonight?
Live long and prosper.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.